Hey guys, how you doing? It's Tom. The mainstream media often lectures the public about how much they care for the children of America. And this is usually done in the context of school shootings. This is what we saw after the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, where 17 young people tragically had their lives taken way too early. So the hypothesis put out by the media is that all of the outrage that they spew over gun control, right? They call for the end of the Second Amendment, further gun control, the mass confiscation of semi-automatic rifles. The hypothesis put out by the media is the reason they do this is because they care about children. And following the Parkland High School shooting, we saw CNN have a town hall in which they brought students from Parkland High School and had them advocate for the repeal of the Second Amendment or further gun control. And of course, we later found out that CNN prevented students who were pro-Second Amendment from the Parkland school from attending the town hall. And those students wanted to put out a second hypothesis, that arming the school staff, arming teachers, would actually keep students safer from school shootings. So our two hypotheses we have are that the mainstream media cares about children, or the second, that arming teachers would keep students safer. Well, yesterday in Maryland, Great Mills High School were victims of an attempted mass school shooting. So a student gets a gun and he went to the school and he opened fire and he hit two students. One is fine, the other's in critical condition. And within 60 seconds, a resource officer at the school, who was in the school armed with a gun, sprinted down the hallway, engaged the shooter, and fatally wounded the school shooter. The school shooter was only able to shoot two students, not kill 17 and shoot many more. Now, this isn't the only time we've seen this. We had the Texas church shooting a couple of months back in which someone opened fire on a church in Texas, and a member of the NRA who was not at the church heard the gunfire going off, grabbed an AR-15, ran to the church, engaged the shooter, and saved countless lives. Now imagine how many more lives could have been saved if the people at that church were themselves carrying a weapon. Would it have been more like the Great Mills High School shooting, where the shooter gets off one shot, two shots, and then he's quickly taken down? We also saw this at Pamela Geller's event. Pamela Geller held an event, a Draw Muhammad event. The purpose of it was to show that, one, to support freedom of speech, and two, to show that people who subscribe to the radical side of Islam would attempt to attack her event. She was correct. They attacked, armed guards on the scene, took down the shooter before anyone was killed. So our second hypothesis, that arming the teachers would keep the students safer, seems to be true. And since we've established that that's true, we can now evaluate the first hypothesis. Because if the media was telling the truth, if their hypothesis was correct, that they care about children, they would do a complete 180 now. They would hold a town hall with students from the Great Mills School, and they would talk about how they were so terrified, and this brave resource officer, thank God he was there, came down the hall and protected them, and they now see how arming the teachers, arming the school staff, keeps students safer. We should do this all around the country. So that's what CNN's going to do, right? No. They're not going to do that. Which suggests the hypothesis that CNN and the mainstream media actually care about children is a fallacy. Instead, what they were doing after the Parkland shooting and all these shootings is they were pushing a political agenda that has come from the top, from the oligarchy, that Americans should be disarmed. That Americans shouldn't have the right to bear arms to protect themselves from the chance that government becomes tyrannical. There's also a second agenda to it. The mainstream media, of course, always pushes, or other than Fox News, which is controlled opposition, pushes left-wing politics. So they want the Democratic Party to succeed, and by making gun control an issue, it gives them a platform to run against Donald Trump on in the upcoming election. Speaking of Donald Trump, and speaking of mainstream media hypocrisy, we had the Cambridge Analytica story break this week. Now, there are multiple parts to this story, but the part I'd like to start with is how the story broke. So, Channel 4 News utilized undercover journalists or undercover reporters to infiltrate Cambridge Analytica, get the CEO, high-ranking members of Cambridge Analytica on tape admitting to the methods they use to manipulate elections, as well as the methods they use to blackmail and bribe politicians. And the mainstream media, of course, has praised this reporting. And they should, because it was great work by Channel 4 in Britain to infiltrate into a corporation and expose what they do from their own words, from the inside. We need much more of this with big corrupt corporations. We need more of this, especially with political parties and governments all around the world. If we could get them on tape, undercover, admitting what they do, people would have a much greater sense of how the world works. So the mainstream media has praised this journalism, and rightfully so, just as I'm praising it. But it does draw an interesting distinction, because how has the mainstream media treated the undercover investigations, the undercover journalism conducted by James O'Keefe and Project Veritas? Because when James O'Keefe and Project Veritas gets Planned Parenthood on video, admitting that they take parts from aborted baby fetuses and sell them for profit, or when Project Veritas gets the Democratic Party, Democratic National Committee on tape, admitting that they pay mentally ill people to incite violence at Trump rallies, or that they illegally, or that they bus people in from other states to vote illegally during elections. When Project Veritas gets CNN on tape, admitting that the entire Russian narrative is a nothing burger. When Project Veritas infiltrates Twitter and gets them to admit that they shadow ban libertarians and conservatives, or pretty much anyone who's pro-Trump, so that they can't get their message out. Well, the mainstream media comes down on Project Veritas, right? They say this isn't real journalism, this is manipulation, this is trickery, this is video editing. Don't look at that. Don't look at that. James O'Keefe, he was convicted of a felony, right? He's a criminal. Yes, he was convicted of filming someone without their consent. That's the whole point. And the fact that there are laws that prevent that just show that our lawmakers are very corrupt in the first place. So it really shows the hypocrisy of the mainstream media. Now, getting into what Cambridge Analytica actually does, or admitted on tape that they do. So, first, one aspect of this, which is very interesting, they hire escorts, prostitutes, they send them to the houses of politicians, and they try to get them on tape, or whatever it might be, so they can blackmail these politicians into doing what they want them to do in the future. This is called honey trapping, and it's something that is very, very common, and it's really how the game of power is played. I know I've reported a lot on why there's so many pedophiles in government, right? Because if you know they're a pedophile, then you pretty much control them, because if that's exposed, they'll go to prison, their lives will be ruined. Well, it's the same concept with these honey traps, and it's good to see CEOs, it's good to see big corporations admitting that this happens on undercover videos. The next aspect of this is how Cambridge Analytica impacted the 2016 presidential election and many other elections that they've worked on. Now, I was already aware of Cambridge Analytica because I followed the Corbett report, who, see, I'm a Trump supporter, and he is in no way likes Trump, but I follow his journalism because he's a great journalist. We can't be in echo chambers, and we should be able to be intellectually honest. So if you follow the Corbett report, you know that he released a report, which I'll put in the reference notes below, titled Psychographics. And it went over in detail how Cambridge Analytica utilized data from Facebook and public data to create voter profiles and target specific voters, psychological warfare type stuff. So basically, Cambridge Analytica utilized data mining through Facebook. They also purchased data from a third party to create these psychological profiles and then use those profiles to target voters. Now, one of the things I found very interesting, and I read this in a report by The Guardian, the psychological profiles utilize the 5 big personality traits. This includes openness, conscientiousness, extrovertism, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Now, the reason this is interesting is that Jordan Peterson, who the media likes to bombard with ad hominem attacks, he often talks about the big 5 personality traits, but he talks about it in the context of explaining the difference in pay gap between men and women. And it's very interesting because Channel 4 were the ones that conducted the undercover videos exposing Cambridge Analytica, and Jordan Peterson did his, of course, now famous interview with Kathy Newman, where he attempted to explain the big 5 personality traits to her and how the big 5 personality traits explained any gap in pay on average between men and women. So, of course, because Cambridge Analytica is associated with Trump, the mainstream media is, oh, well, you see, this is how Trump won the election. It's all manipulation. He stole the election. He utilized vulnerability in human psychology, and this is well-established science. He was able to manipulate you. So it's well-established science when it's the Trump election team manipulating voters, but it's not well-established science when it has to do with the gender pay gap. Now, of course, the mainstream media is right. It is, in fact, well-established science. And it definitely helped the Trump campaign target voters. Now, does this necessarily mean it's manipulative? Just because you're targeting someone with the truth doesn't mean it's manipulative. There's a degree of that, of course, and I'm sure, in fact, I know that a lot of emotions are played too, and that's one of the things explained in the video. But it more shows the hypocrisy of the media. In fact, with this one, the mainstream media has really exposed themselves. The media jumped on this story because it's Donald Trump and they're opposed to him, and Cambridge Analytica helped or assisted with his campaign. But they act as if the public knows nothing, like we have no idea what goes on in the world. And I guess that's the base that they're trying to manipulate. But for those of us who pay attention, in 2012, it's all over the mainstream media. Type in President Obama utilizes voter data to win 2012 election. The mainstream media bragged about what a genius Obama was for utilizing public available data, creating these complex voter profiles to specifically target people with specific messages to win the 2012 presidential election. And this was celebrated. And they act as if we don't remember that. And this week, Carol Davidson, the director of media analytics for the Obama campaign, admitted that Facebook allowed them to do things that they wouldn't have allowed others to do. That Facebook was surprised that the Obama campaign was able to, and I quote, "we sucked out the whole social group." Facebook was surprised by just how much information, just how effective the Obama campaign was able to be by utilizing Facebook's information in their databases that they keep on all of us. And this isn't unique to the Obama campaign. In 2015, emails from WikiLeaks sent from Facebook COO, Chief Operating Officer Sheryl Sandberg, to John Podesta indicated that Facebook wanted Hillary to win badly and that they provided the Hillary campaign data on multiple different occasions. We also know from WikiLeaks that starting in 2015, right from when, even before Hillary Clinton announced her presidential campaign, that Google CEO Eric Schmidt was assisting the Clinton campaign in formatting their targeting and what their message would be and how everything would work, how they would utilize technology. So the media expects us not to realize that this is how political campaigns operate, right? The big social media companies assist the politicians that they find favorable. They give them the data that they collect on the public, right? Facebook that's their business model, right? We go on Facebook, we click what we like, we type in comments, we follow this page, we follow that page, we put frown faces on what we don't like, and Facebook collects all of this data and they sell it to advertisers, which is why, if you ever realize, if you look something up on the internet, you type something into Google, and then you go on Facebook, and whatever you were researching, now it shows up in your Facebook feed. So, oh, you researched tents? Oh, well, here's a nice outdoor tent. Would you like to buy it? Well, how did they know that information? Because they're selling your information to advertisers. Well, of course, they also do this to political campaigns, and even more nefariously, they just give the information to campaigns that push the political agenda that the oligarchs want from the top. So they help the Obama campaign, they help the Clinton campaign, and they expect you not to know this, and then the mainstream media sees that the Trump campaign utilized this, although Facebook wouldn't give them the information directly, but the Trump campaign hired Cambridge Analytica, and they took care of it. And they say, oh, we got them, let's expose this. Well, where was the mainstream media warning the public that the big social media companies, that Facebook, that Google, they're not just social media, that they're big data mining companies that are selling our data to advertisers, to political campaigns, creating psychological profiles on us to governments because they contract with the Pentagon, they contract with the State Department. In fact, Cambridge Analytica, also their parent company, it's exposed in an article written by The Guardian, actually contracted with the Pentagon. So they're creating psychological profiles on us, giving them to advertisers, giving them to the government. Where was the mainstream media exposing this when it was Hillary Clinton, when it's Obama, when it's corporations, when it's the government using our data against us via psychological warfare? They didn't expose it because they're using the data as well. Everything you see on the mainstream media, everything you see in Hollywood, everything you see on social media, it's psychological warfare meant to target you. And it's coming largely, it's made possible largely by these social media companies. And it really shows the hypocrisy of the social media companies, of the mainstream media, who doesn't think you're aware of this, who doesn't think you could put this together, that just saw an opportunity to attack their political opponent, the Trump campaign, which they deserve their criticism as well, although it's hard to criticize any political campaign for not utilizing available data. But the social media companies, that's who we really should be criticizing. Facebook for selling our data, right? Google for giving away our data to governments, to corporations, and the mainstream media for knowing about this and not making the public aware of it. Because when they made the public aware of it, Facebook stock dropped something ridiculous, $40 billion, in a day. So they are the big hypocrites. They think we're not aware of how these things work, and we need to expose their hypocrisy. And I think Edward Snowden put it best. The rebranding of intelligence gathering companies to social media companies is the greatest achievement in marketing rebranding since the Department of War was rebranded the Department of Defense. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you want to support me financially, I really appreciate it. www.patreon.com/FFRnews. I'm Tom Anderson on Gab. I'm TomFFRnews on Twitter, FFRnews on Facebook, Tom Anderson on Facebook, Tom Anderson on Steemit, TomFFRnews on Minds. Click the bell below. Share this link.